Today, we'll be discussing about Revit API, Civil 3D, and the InfraWorks API updates. So we are about to start. So, Bill, maybe you can start.
Yeah, started. Yeah, started.
Okay, hello everybody once again. So we are starting the day 3 of DevDays online. And today our topic will be Revit API and Civil 3D and InfraWorks API updates. So I have, okay. So the agenda today is we'll start from Revit API update. This will be part 1. We have another one 1 hour later. This will be ADN member only. And followed by the first one, Revit API update part 1 will take about 40 to 45 minutes, including QA, and presented by Sasha Crotti, Revit API product platform and API and product platform manager. And then followed by Civil 3D and InfraWorks API update. This will be presented by Augusto. And just a kind reminder, I know some of you already are aware, but since we made it a little special this year, we have a part 2 for ADN member only updates where we'll be talking about something we can't exclude the talk publicly until embargo is shifted. So for those of you who aren't aware about this one yet, then to access to the second part, please go to the adn.autodesk.io, ADN extranet. And then from the headline, there is a item. It should be the third one right now. Register now for the Autodesk DevDay online webinars, updated version, and scroll down in the page, and towards the bottom, there is a one new added, and there is a one for the Revit API and Civil 3D. Please click there to get on the second part of the webcast. I just wanted to make sure that people, ADN members, are aware of that. So with that, I'm going to pass the presentation to the Revit Sasha about Revit. So Sasha. Sasha, did
yes,
you get?
I'm right here. Sorry, mute button is not responding to me. All right, so thank you, Makako. I'm going to be talking today, do a brief API update. This is a little bit different from the usual update we do because this is more of a public version. For those of you who haven't seen me at AU or somewhere else, I am the Revit Platform Services Product Manager. I've been with the Revit team for quite a number of years at this point. And so my area of responsibility from a product management perspective includes Revit Platform, the API, and collaboration for Revit. So and then also all kind of the associated Forge services. So if you have any questions about kind of any of those directions, I'm happy to chat with you at any point. So feel free to reach out to me after this talk. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. This will work with me. All right, so before I start talking, I just want to give you the standard statement that tomorrow Revit could be a totally different thing. So anything I say here may change tomorrow. So please be aware of that, and please don't make any purchasing decisions based on what you see here. So a quick agenda for what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be doing a quick intro covering how the Revit team has been working with the community to date. And then giving a quick strategic overview of where we're talking about as far as investment areas. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about Revit and Forge. So one of the things that we did at this point, it was probably close to, it's probably been about a year and a half ago, is we released a public Revit roadmap. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do that is we actually wanted to be really open with our entire community. And make everybody aware of what it is that we're investing in and what we're not investing in. And we hope to make this a really useful tool, not only to all of our customers who are interested in finding out what is on the horizon, but also to all of our partners who are developing, so that you actually know what we are planning, and you have an idea of what was going on and how we can help you and how we can help each other, really. So the intent here is to be really, really open, really honest, and a lot of what you'll see me presenting in terms of strategy is actually going to be very closely aligned to what you actually go ahead and publish on a public Revit roadmap. And this is really meant to be a bi-directional conversation, which is why we also have the other direction where we have Revit ideas, and we can gather your input in terms of talking about where do we make our next investments. You know, ultimately, Revit is not something that we're going to get, you know, going to be able to do something in, you know, necessarily implement the next day, but certainly it helps us really understand where are the most important pain points. And a lot of the time, especially from the developer community, I get comments, well, you know, API ideas are never going to make it to the top of the list. Well, they don't have to, right? Because when I go and I look for API requests and I try to figure out what it is that our developer community needs, I look at those requests specifically. They're not judged against other ideas and Revit ideas. So it's certainly quite possible that this is a large community, just given the number of people on this call. So there are plenty of people who can vote and identify what are the most critical ideas and fixes that we can do from an API perspective. So please do enter API requests on there. It is really important. And if you have a lot of people using your tool, I make no judgments about you going ahead and having all those people vote on your idea as well. And the other part about us being open, if you're not already aware, we do actually publish a monthly build of Revit, and we really do encourage everybody to take a look and, you know, install it. Certainly for API purposes, we do create and install every quarter. Our goal here is to be as open as possible, and we want you to be able to provide feedback continuously. We don't want to do it after release, so please do join. If you're not an ADN member, you can email Revit Preview Access at Autodesk.com, and if you are an ADN member, you can go ahead, go to beta and join the ADN beta, or if you can, there's also a link on the ADN extranet. So all of those things are really important parts of how we develop our product. So I do wanted to make sure that I talked about them real briefly so that everybody is aware of all the opportunities you can actually interact with the Revit team. So switching gears a little bit and diving a little bit more into strategy and how do we actually strategically approach some of these different areas, and how do we take that feedback and actually create that into product. From an architecture and core perspective, we have two high-level goals. One of them for architecture, specifically creating smarter, more outcome-based BIM so that we can provide more insight and increase efficiency. And that is something, a really strong driver for us for architects. And we see the developer community being a big part of that, because a lot of the tools that you build actually help us drive towards that outcome. And from a technological perspective, from a core underlying perspective, we really want to reimagine Revit so that it continues to be a significant tool that everybody uses in a cloud-connected world. So that means taking parts of Revit and making it available in Forge, and opening up access to Revit data so that it can actually be used in applications like yours. So when we talk about the different areas of investment for us, we talk about 5 different categories. And these are buckets, what we think are really important continuous investment areas. And they're things that we've come up with, and they're really the priorities that we see that we need to make sure that we continue to invest in. And the first one is strengthen. So strengthening is about strengthening our existing product. Automating is about making tools that actually simplify customer workflows. We also need to modernize the experience in Revit. We need to connect people and products together, and we need to help our customers make informed decisions about their work. Diving a little bit deeper into those, when we talk about strengthening our product, we really talk about 3 different things. One of them is scalability, and we realize that our customers are creating models that are larger and larger every year, and so we want to make sure that we're making the investment to support those models so that we are actually keeping up with our customers' demands. When we talk about quality, that covers both quality of the software and security. And this is something that our teams have a continued emphasis on. This is something that we goal them on. And this is really an important area of investment for us. And this is more of a continuous thing, although occasionally we will certainly do projects in this area as well. And then the biggest part of this bucket is definitely Revit ideas. So how can we take the pain points that our customers and our developers are experiencing and making sure that we actually create better solutions, more efficient solutions, and react to those ideas. In the automate space, the most common thing we talk about is actually automating tedious workflows, and that's eliminating things that where a customer is sitting there clicking something 100 times. That should never be the experience in our product. So that is a really important area of investment for us. We're also taking a look at how we can start to consider using machine learning to actually provide better knowledge and better decisions for our customers. And that also extends to more proactive feedback. And so when we talk about proactive feedback, it's really rather than the software doing a post-processing step at some point to check something, can we actually respond, give information to the customer earlier so that the customer can make smarter decisions? One example would be something comparing clash detection to clash prevention. Clash prevention would be much more proactive feedback. In terms of modernization, what is one area we've invested heavily in, you've probably seen this if you've been tracking the latest releases, is that we're looking at creating more immersive design. When we say immersive design, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're investing only in VR or AR technologies. That actually means that every experience in Revit is more immersive so that our customers can better understand how the product is performing. We've also been talking a lot about project and content access. So this is a continuous problem for us, both managing the content and actually creating content that is helpful. So that is an area that we're looking at to see how we can improve our customer experience. And then when we say a reimagined experience, we really do want to have a modern UI and update the experiences that our customers are having and take advantage of technology. So a lot of the tools that we're building are really trying to modernize that UI, keep it up to date, and make sure that we're making investments in that area as well. When we talk about connecting, so when we talk about connect, what we really are talking about is two different areas. One of them is actually connecting teams together. So we realize that none of our customers are actually working independently, that everybody is working in a team. And so that it becomes a really important part of us to support that collaboration between professionals. When we talk about connected workflows, that's more connecting our products together, making sure that when one of our customers buys an AEC collection, we are really making sure that data is transferred seamlessly between those products. And then ultimately, we also need to support next-gen BIM and quantum and making sure that that ecosystem is able to thrive and have access to Revit data so that it can actually, we can make the right connections to the right products at the right time. And last but not least, a big area for us is Inform. And Inform is an area where we want to help our customers make smarter decisions by providing those real-time insights. That includes architectural simulation, but also ultimately one area we also consider falling this bucket is building code compliance. So the earlier we can provide that information to the customers, the smarter decisions they can make so that it actually influences design rather than requires redesign. So that is kind of a high-level overview of where we are investing and things that we are thinking about. And then the next step is to really talk about how does that translate to Forge. In particular, the area that we see most applicable to Forge is the Connect bucket, where we take a lot of Revit data and Revit capabilities and make them available in Forge. And how do we connect a completely cloud-based application to working with Revit data, because that is where the, currently where the data is stored. And we want to make sure that we're connecting those two things together. And the biggest investment that we're making around that area is actually going out and extending the design automation API to support Revit. So taking Revit's engine and making it available as a Forge service so that you can actually create seamless cloud applications that do work directly with Revit data. So what's the value? Why do we do this? So one of the biggest things, certainly for you as partners, is to ability to enhance customer workflows and to create new applications that work completely differently without ever having to have an install of Revit on the desktop. For customers, the big value is that there is an opportunity to solve very specific targeted problems without having to, again, have it install on the desktop without needing to, without really needing to purchase an extra seat of Revit just to solve that problem. And for Autodesk, the biggest value is that we can actually build our own cloud-based solutions on top of this engine. And I point that out in large part because a lot of the time people ask us, is this a service that's going to be around? Can I really rely on it? We are building our own tools on top of this. This is absolutely a big area of investment for us that we expect to be maintaining for a very, very long time. So what will the Design Automation API for Revit be able to do? Well, it will be able to access the full Revit DB API layer and as a cloud service. And it'll be able to execute .NET add-ins and ultimately Dynamo scripts as well. And what we want to be able to do is actually access that custom functionality while in the cloud, but be able to work directly with Revit model. And that means being able, and then ultimately, because it's now in the cloud, you can actually go ahead and read data from anywhere and save it to anywhere. Of course, as all these things go, there's limitations. So it won't be able to do interactive, you won't be able to create an interactive experience with Design Automation, so you won't be able to have a live session that you interact back and forth with. It is a batch operation. And then you won't have access directly to the Revit data through a REST API. The API access will still be .NET based on the existing Revit API. And of course, there's no UI API access because there is no UI to interact with. Ideally, when we talk about this service, what we really expect is that most applications will port fairly easily over to the Design Automation API. The one thing that you need to consider as you're writing applications is how to separate the UI and DB layers so that there is no reliance of your code on the API and no reliance on an interaction with a customer. So what kind of workflows will we be able to do with the Design Automation API? Typically, you'll have a partner or customer application that could be either cloud-based or desktop-based that will be able to interact with Design Automation API in Forge. And that application will be able to create Revit files, extract data from cloud-based Revit files into things like Excel or database, or really anything, any kind of data format that you can envision. And also, ultimately, to take a Revit file, modify it, and put it back in its location. And that includes both just a RVT that you'll be able to overwrite, but ultimately we also want to be able to support modifications to C4R files. That's collaboration for Revit. So going a little bit deeper into these workflows, the first workflow that we have is the create workflow. And examples of this is the ability to create RFAs from a catalog on demand, create RVTs based on information. A lot of partners that we've talked to actually have all the knowledge needed to generate an RVT from scratch, but right now they struggle with being able to do that in a cloud-based workflow. So this will certainly be possible going forward. Things like creating a stair layout generator. Stairs can be a painful experience for customers, but if you can actually create an app that does that simpler, that would be a great application of this tool. Certainly, if you're able to read other file formats and you understand other file formats, you can convert from those to an RVT or an RFA. and then ultimately also generate full documentation. So if you know how to document something given a model, that is another workflow be supported by this creation workflow. So in terms of extracting information, this is what we hear a lot from our customers because there is such a demand to be able to take Revit data and put it into whatever format that our customers need for downstream tools. That could be Excel, it could be databases, other formats that we don't natively support as Revit. Ultimately, that can actually that information can start to be used to create visualizations and better understand information about the model in the cloud. So there's a lot of opportunity to say, well, given a Revit file, what's in it? How do I analyze it? How do I make decisions based on that data? Certainly another aspect of this is automated extraction. So this service will also be connected to the model derivative API, so you'll be able to extract data from Revit, but then ultimately also schedule tasks to be able to do that on a regular basis. There's an opportunity to run things like model QA/QC checks and code checking based again on the extraction, where you can access the Revit data that's stored in the cloud and perform and apply any kind of knowledge that you uniquely have to that data. Ultimately, there's an opportunity also for extracting geometry for things like clash detection, and then also to share information with consultants without the need for Revit. We hear this a lot, where customers basically want to simplify their model before they share it with somebody else because they're concerned about sharing some of the data stored in the original model. Now, a process like this could actually be automated, where the model is simplified or cleaned up before it is sent out and made available to a third party. Another workflow is update, and this is probably the most powerful one, but certainly the most challenging one for us to implement. But what we want to be able to support ultimately is something like a nightly model check on C4R, or even an update to a new standard. So, one customer we've talked to is very interested in actually taking models and applying company standards to them overnight, anytime that they have to, they have to do that process, so that somebody doesn't have to sit there and monitor the process the entire way. It can actually just be done in the cloud. Certainly, if there's company standards or common modeling and documentation mistakes that are not acceptable for a customer, this would be an opportunity to go ahead and fix those on a regular basis in an automated way. Any kind of batch operations and updates. And replacing out-of-date content. If you can identify that a certain piece of content is out of date, you can actually update that automatically. Run scheduled Dynamo scripts once we're able to support Dynamo scripting in the service. And then also generate design options and really be creative in terms of being able to create Revit files based on information that's contained in one Revit file and extend that and make it much more detailed. So switching over and talking a little bit how it works, at a very high level, this is a very straightforward service. It works the same as the design automation API for AutoCAD works today. So you typically have a user that is interacting with a website or service. That website or service will submit a work item to the design automation API. Once that work item is submitted and it's design automation API starts executing on that work item, it'll pull down data or an RVT from a specified location. It'll execute the tasks that it is doing and upload the results. And while the job is running, the website or service can track the progress and identify whether a job is complete or not. So when we talk about terminology, the terminology is actually very much the same as it is in Design Automation API. Now I do want to put the caveat out there that this is likely to be changing slightly in the future. But at a fundamental level will still be very much the same. The exact terminology may change a little bit, but this is going to be a shared API between AutoCAD, Inventor, and Revit. So we are looking to make sure that the front end is very similar, even though under the hood, the engine-specific APIs are going to be very specific to the engines. So the big decision that you have to make is which engine you're doing, and then specify the correct add-in code. There are basically only three main objects in the API: an app package, which is the contents of the code that you want to execute, an activity that defines what you want to happen, and a work item is something that executes that activity. So this is actually pretty straightforward. There are plenty of examples on a Forge, so I encourage you to take a look because this will be very similar for Revit. So talking a little bit about the roadmap, I can't give specific dates, unfortunately, during this call, but I do want to say that currently we're in invite-only beta, which means that we can only support a very limited number of partners. A large part of that has to do with the capacity of the team to actually onboard new people, because we're not complete with onboarding documentation and self-help. Once we get to kind of a minimal documentation and ability to support partners easily, we expect to be able to just switch over to public beta, where we'll give access to everybody who is a Forge partner, and then gather kind of that wider feedback and ensure that we are very, very stable before we actually go to public release. And then there are certainly, I talked about a few different functionalities that are not going to be available, unfortunately, at the very beginning of the service. That includes C4R support, Dynamo scripting support, and we ultimately will be seeking a SOC 2 certification, but we're not likely to have that by the time of public release. So just to kind of finish this off, I wanted to give you quite a quick little demo of the Design Automation API for Revit in action. This is thanks to Mikako for creating this nice little sample. And what this does is this actually takes an empty RVT file and uploads it to Venture 60. And then what it does is actually says, generate this kind of stair for me right now in that file. And so you can see that the job was running and now it's succeeded. And so when you go to A360, you see that that model has been updated. It's now a newer version. And if you open it, you can see that a stair was generated in that RVT. So this is basically an interaction not only showing that you can actually perform this work in an RVT, but because of all the technologies that we have with Forge, including the Forge viewer, you can actually go ahead and start integrating this into your product. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and switch over to Q&A and answer some questions.
Thank you, Sasha. So we have a couple of questions on the QA panel. Can you see, Sasha? Maybe you can read and then answer. So the first one is I already quickly answered because I knew but it's probably interesting for other people. So right now, Revit doesn't have a core console, which is the word used by the AutoCAD side. That means that we don't have a way to test Revit add-in without UI on desktop side. So right now it's a little bit difficult, but according to Diane, who is leading the Revit IO team, or design automation for Revit team, she is hoping to have it. So that's what I could answer. But Sasha, maybe you can take a look at the other ones. So for instance, like, would it be possible to export to IFC with a design automation API? I think it's yes. Huh?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a matter of us making sure that that component is installed. So either between the Design Automation API or the Model Derivative API, which is actually already possible, that is certainly going to be an option. I would be interested in learning a little bit more about what you would be interested in customizing beyond what's available as part of the Model Derivative API currently.
Okay, so the next one, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I can read off. When will the invite-only beta be available, and how to join? So
You have an email.
Yes,
address.
there's actually there's actually a survey that you can fill out to apply. Now, again, I do want to caution that we have a lot of applicants, and so part of the application is making a really interesting business case, because I think if there's something that our team can learn from what you're looking to do, that's really important. So make sure that you spell that out when you apply. So the website is www.autodesk.com/RevitOnForge.
Okay. www.autodesk.com/RevitOnForge.
Yes.
Good.
So then the next question, when is the Stair app going to be available to use? So the Stair app is more of a demo sample. So when we go to public beta, I expect we'll be providing a number of samples to use, and hopefully we'll be able to convert this into a sample that you can reference.
Yeah. So since I made that one, so it's easy to answer for me. So what I did with that Stair sample is that we have a Stair automation SDK example in Revit SDK. What I did is that I just converted it. It was very simple. So it will be a very good example to show, how easy it is to convert, as long as your application doesn't use a UI. So definitely we'll be posting that one as an example. So it will show you how to convert to Revit, design automation for Revit API side, and together with access to BIM A360 storage side.
Okay.
All
right. Thanks.
So
all right, so the next one is, will there be any breaking or functional changes in the API? Absolutely, and I encourage you to join the NDA ADN only call right after this. That starts in about 30 minutes. Mikako, perhaps you can put up that slide again at some point.
Okay.
Or provide a link. Yep.
Okay, so show my... Oh, I had to take... sorry. I had to take show my screen.
So the next question was, is the pricing structure of any of the APIs expected to change with these new features? I don't think we expect to make changes to this pricing structure immediately, but we will certainly consider what the best opportunities are for us to make sure that the API is as efficient as it can be. So I think the general pricing model will be very similar. The exact prices are just not something that we've made a decision about at this point.
Oh, by the way, Sasha, going back to a previous question about the breaking change. So yeah, he's asking between January beta and then release. So we are not expecting too much, right? You meant from
I do not believe that there are any breaking changes between January beta and release. I'm not that aware.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Sorry, I misread that question. Thank you. So the next question, will error conditions be expressed to applications calling to the design automation service? Absolutely. There's also an expectation that the apps using the design automation service actually write their own error handling. But yes, we'll be providing a couple of different things. We'll certainly be able to provide an environment where you can actually debug things locally, because we don't expect you to have to use the service to actually create the apps. That's going to be a little bit longer term, but that's also going to be possible. And yes, we will be providing information in terms of what's happening in the API. Okay. So what is the latency for making trivial edits to an RVT with a design automation API? By trivial edits, I mean creating one wall, etc. So that is a really, really good question, and something that we're discussing with our team today. One of the one of the interesting things is I would actually like to hear back from you what you would expect or what an acceptable latency would be. So there will certainly be some, because we will be putting these jobs into a queue. So it's a question of how many jobs we're processing and how quickly you need to be processed. One of the things that I was actually thinking about is having multiple queues. So I would certainly be interested to hear about your thoughts on that subject. So what, all right,
Sasha,
so next one is, yes.
Just a point, because it's a very common question on other Forge APIs. This is not the latency topic, right? This is not intended to be a real-time edit of files. The same applies for design automation with AutoCAD as well. So yeah, that's a common question on being real-time.
Yes, absolutely. I agree that it's not going to be real time, but I would be interested to hear about what acceptable timeframes are in terms of the customer experience and customer experience.
And then from my experience, the running Revit API is relatively quick, but like checking on the web, like translation takes a little longer time. So compared with, if you have a lot of experience with viewer services, then you'll probably feel like Revit side is very quick, at least. That was my impression.
So the next question is, what core versions will you expect to be supported? At this point, we don't have any plans for supporting anything prior to 2018. Certainly a consideration for going forward if that ends up being something that we need to add.
Let's take a few more questions. Then if any questions not answered, feel free to send to me. I will pass on those questions to appropriate person in the team.
Okay.
I'm sorry for this. We are running a bit late.
So if we need to use other pre-existing RFA files and their type catalogs, do they need to be uploaded to Forge, or can we refer to a public URL, something like S3 and Amazon? Absolutely. So anything that has a signed URL location, then we'll be able to access with the service. Will there be more C4R support through the desktop API? At present, it's not even possible to automate the opening of C4R models. Certainly, I think that is a continuous area of investment for us, and I do recommend taking a look at the beta. All right, I think that was 2 questions.
Yeah, thanks. So
Yes.
if any questions not answered, please send an email to me, Virupaksha. You will have my email ID in your invitation. I will pass on those to appropriate person in my team. So Augusto, would you like to take the next stage for Civil 3D and other updates? Thank you, Sasha.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sasha.
Yes. Thank you. So we are coming up next. We start next with the Civil 3D and InfraWorks update. And let me start sharing my screen. Just a sec, because my okay. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a quick update from Civil 3D side, and later just a very quick one on InfraWorks as well regarding to ADN partners and API side. As Sasha mentioned, this is intended to be a quick preview, a quick look at what's coming, and there is no guarantee the changes we are showing here will be available on the final product. So keep that in mind when on the next slides. And I will start with some updates on the Civil 3D product, some information about that, and then on the API side. So let's start with the product. So we have a few areas of focus on Civil 3D. So design and efficiency is one of them. And there are a few improvements we have on the product. I'm just highlighting a few of those improvements. And one of all of those improvements are based on feedback we got from the Civil 3D ideas and some other types of feedbacks. And the first one is create a fixed circular or fixed parabolic vertical curve when creating alignments on Civil 3D. That's something that was requested for some time. The next one is the total length, total curve length available as part of the panorama view. So when you looking at one of the alignment, we now have this property that is also a request, and is also available as part of the profile layout parameters dialog and the profile entity vista dialog. So that will be available in there as well. So another area of improvements about production efficient updates, production efficient, sorry, and the ability to open and save multiple drawings and template files at once for a specific version of Civil 3D using Autodesk batch save utility. So this is also available there as well. Will be available in 2019. Sorry. And the next one is on the collaboration and data exchange. That we are working more on integrating with BIM 360, sorry, with InfraWorks. And now it's the create a corridor from InfraWorks component road. And that's been going on for a few versions, and also now on the next release. So, and also on the collaboration, export and import alignments to IFC, which is a common standard format, and also being supported, improvements on that support. And then now on the API side, that's something that we are working on to fix defects, change requests we have from customers. If you are ADN and a submit of those requests, you can also submit those requests on the forum. I'm highlighting here the changes, the exchange requests we are addressing on this new release. So if you have posted a question on ADN, on Civil 3D forum or through ADN support, we usually reply to you with a number. That number is just for reference on our side, but this is what we are addressing on this release. So if you have those requests on your support, that's a good news that we're fixing those as well. So I have 5 of them here, and mostly some tiny things that are really annoying sometimes. So we are trying to improve those, and not only those 5, but also a few more that's on the other side as well. So surface, settings, display style, and profile view. So those are the changes the change requests we're addressing on the next release. So that's a very quick summary. On the InfraWorks side, I just have some 2 major information about that. Actually, if you go to beta.autodesk.com, the InfraWorks beta version is already integrating with BIM 360. So that's quite interesting that you can submit or connect your data from InfraWorks to BIM 360. And what we are working on, and that was also part of the feedback session we had a few months before at AU Las Vegas, is to include BIM 360 and allow users to access those modules from viewer and model derivative, so you can extract that information. So that's what we are working on. and part of that is available on the BIM 360 product. So if you're working with InfraWorks and you don't have that yet, go to beta.autodesk.com to get this release and start playing with that. And well, I'm not really talking about what's new on the product side, because there's a lot of topics. And actually, I have a colleague that he's doing presentations every quarterly presentations with the new releases of the product. He's actually presenting every month, Eric. He's presenting every month all the new releases, new features on the product, and the quarterly releases we have on InfraWorks. So my best suggestion for you is to keep an eye on those updates, so you can see what's coming on the product. And I know that the next one, for instance, is coming on February 14th, next week, and he's going to talk about VR and how to show your InfraWorks product with VR. So that's quite interesting to watch, and that's the best place to get updates on InfraWorks side. So let me check here on the questions panel. So can I use InfraWorks or Civil 3D in Forge? So okay, so I'm looking at some questions. Can I use InfraWorks or Civil 3D API in Forge? So if you upload a Civil 3D drawing to Forge, either on A360 or BIM 360, that Civil 3D drawing can be translated, and you can extract the properties. So if you go to forge.autodesk.com/blog and search for Civil 3D, there is a post explaining how it works. So that's a good place to get started. As I mentioned here, we don't support yet InfraWorks, but that's where we're heading to include InfraWorks as part of BIM 360. So I will ask trivial edit questions. No, that's another thing. Not actually a question. So another point as well. Let me check the other question. API latency, I think that's also for Revit. And the other question is some updates on the map. Well, I don't have that information here. If I would suggest you to keep an eye when we have the documentation ready. We don't have that list available yet on what's coming on next release of Map 3D. And what else? When will AC collection include inventory for part of design and management? So when will AC collection include inventory for part catalog design and management? So I don't have answers on our sales approach. We are trying to focus here on the technical side, but I can track that down for you. You submitting as black box cards, right? So if you can send that as a question on our ADN support or via forum, I can check that information for you if that's something that is available or public, right? So I can check that for you on the business side. So it's possible to talk about IFD in Civil 3D. You mean, do you mean IFC, Patricia? So the next one is support for bidirectional languages like Arabic and Hebrew in base text with TTF font in base product consistently. Is that I think that's AutoCAD support, right? I don't have that information here on AutoCAD site support, but we're going to have an AutoCAD section next week, right, Vero? And then if that's something that is available on AutoCAD, that should be addressed there, or I can track that down for you. Again, for a very specific question, like in this case, the AutoCAD one, I'll suggest you submit on the forum or ADN support, so I can track that for you.
Yes, I think we had to make sure if this is a question about product or APIs.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Mika.
Yeah.
So so Steve is also asking if you're going to do any product demonstration here. Not at this session. Those products are not available to demonstration yet. But the beta version of Civil 3D, for instance, is available on the beta portal, and well, that's the place for you to get access to the product at this time. Next one, will the part family and part size creation with the API and extending the pipe network catalog with custom properties be improved in a new feature? Steve Crockett is asking about part family and part size improvements in near future. I don't. It's not being addressed on this release, but I'll happily create an issue for you on that, so we can address that. So again, please submit that either on the forum or through ADN support with details, explain what you want on part family and part size, so we can reproduce the problem and try to address that in the next update. Keep in mind that, for instance, on Civil 3D, the next release 2019 for now is an extension of it's some new features, but also include all the new features we released on the update 1 on 2018 update 1. So we're not releasing just one pack of new features, but yet 2 packages this last year. So please submit those changes so we can have an idea of what you need. And we need to reproduce the problem so we can, or at least have a better description of the feature improvement, so we can address that. Yeah. So Rob Todd is asking about pressure pipe APIs. We're not addressing new features on the pipe on that API on this release. Yeah, sorry about that. So you plan to integrate with Esri. So we did an announcement about Esri back at AU Las Vegas. That announcement was the collaboration we're having with them. But our teams, our technical people from our side and from Esri, we're still discussing, we're still working on this, discussing and working to have this. And I hope to have news for you probably in a few months on exactly what we are going to implement or we are going to release. And but we are working very hard on that. And I know that on my case, for instance, I'm having a lot of talks from our side and Esri side. So yeah, stay tuned for updates on the Esri integration. Very good. A lot of questions. I love questions. It's much better than just presenting. What else? I think that's basically it. So if no more questions, thank you. And as Mikako mentioned, we're going to start the second part of this presentation. And Sasha will also start that. Please join us there as well.
Yeah.
One more question, I think.
Please note that it's a totally different session, so you need to sign out and sign in for that session.
Okay, so there is just a duplicated question about pressure pipe. As I mentioned before, we were not releasing API changes on the pressure pipe network on this release. And the very last one, because we are starting to finish our time here, is there a plan to build a smart city platform? I'm not sure what you mean, but Civil 3D is focused on the detailing part of the project, and InfraWorks on the broader view of the project. And but both of those products are focused on the design stage. But I'm not sure what you mean here. If you can elaborate your question, you can also submit your question, send your question on the forum. Or if there is a very specific one in this case, you can also send me my email. So it's my first dot last name, so augusto.gonçalves@autodesk.com, and I can understand better what you mean. So web platform to view infrastructure project. So if you mean a web platform to view infrastructure project, if you mean like InfraWorks, that's the part of the plan to include to connect InfraWorks with BIM 360. So that's the plan. So after that, we can then access InfraWorks models on BIM 360, and you can expose that somewhere else using Forge APIs. That's it. I think we're out of time now, and thank you very much, and talk to you soon.